At 71 years old, Ron Howard did something that made everyone gasp. He smiled that special, knowing smile, the one that helps movie stars be their best. And he said things that would shock all of Hollywood and everyone who watches movies. 7 names, 7 super famous actresses, 7 secrets he'd kept hidden for many, many years until right now. What happens when the boss of normal, famous movies, the man who gave us the nicest stories in American film, decides to show everyone his secret private life? When the director who built his career on happy family stories and exciting people drama finally spills the beans about the love and passion that happened behind closed dressing room doors and in fancy hotel rooms. The result is super surprising, a little bit shocking, and totally attention-grabbing. Because Ron Howard, the man who has won important awards, directed some of the movies that made the most money ever, and is known as one of Hollywood's most respected voices, has always been honest. And this honesty is even bigger than any movie script he has ever made real. For more than 50 years, Ron has been the very good movie maker everyone can count on. The man with the soft, kind way of directing. The person who worked with actors and knew how to help them give amazing performances. The person who turned simple stories into things that everyone talks about. He's directed over 60 films, gotten so many nominations, started a company that has made tons of money, and taught many young movie makers who learned by watching him work. But inside all that job success was a man with wants, with strong feelings, with moments that would make even his biggest fans see him very differently. The TV chat started out normal. He was there to talk about his newest documentary movie, to chat about his lasting love for telling stories, his new projects, maybe share some fun stories or memories about working with the biggest stars. But then the interviewer leaned in with a cheeky smile and asked the question that changed everything. At your age, with all the big things you've done in movies, with your perfect reputation and how respected you are, is there anything you've never talked about publicly? Any secret parts of your life that your friends and the public just don't know about? That's when Ron's eyes sparkled with something exciting and a little bit naughty, something that suggested the talk was about to go somewhere nobody expected. He tilted his head, that thinking pose that he always does in interviews, and his voice went down to a whisper that somehow sounded stronger than any command he'd given on a movie set. "Honey," he said, using that friendly, charming director voice that has won over so many actors over the years. "There are 7 secret roads I took that nobody knows about, 7 women who saw a side of me that never made it into any of my movies or interviews." The room became completely quiet. Even the people holding the cameras seemed to stop breathing because this wasn't the Ron they knew from award shows and celebrity news. This was a man ready to tell secrets that had been burning inside him for many years. 7 actresses, he kept going, his voice getting louder with each word. 7 legends who shared more than just movie sets with me. Women who made my heart beat fast and made my brain think in ways that had nothing to do with the scenes we were filming together. He paused, enjoying the moment, watching as everyone in the room realized they were about to hear something completely new. The king of big, popular movies was about to name names, real names, legendary names. Actresses whose acting has been important for many years, whose beauty and talent are famous all over the world, whose careers have shaped American culture. And he was about to say that he had been in love with every single one of them. The first name came out of his mouth like a line he had practiced perfectly. "Deborah Winger," he said, picking his words carefully, like a director choosing the best words for a very important scene. "I met her on the set of a romantic drama movie in the early 80s. Now, that woman had a way of being that filled the whole room. Working with Deborah wasn't just about catching a great performance for the camera. It was about a connection that burned brighter than any movie lights could ever shine. People always wondered if there was something more between us than just our work together. And honey, there was everything between us. Those late nights on set weren't just about making our scenes perfect. They were about finding a rhythm that had nothing to do with the movie script we were working with. Deborah had this way of looking at you that made the rest of the world completely disappear. When she spoke, it felt like she was talking right into your soul, pulling you to a place you'd never been before. Away from the cameras, far from the crew and the studio bosses, Deborah Winger was pure temptation mixed with talent and smarts. The woman could make talking about what a character wanted sound like sweet talk. He remembered one special night in a Los Angeles hotel after a long day of filming that had worn them both out. They had gone up to the fancy top-floor suite, supposedly to talk about the deeper meaning of their next scene together. But the only deeper meaning that mattered was the secret language of wanting that filled the space between them when the cameras stopped rolling and the real show began. Deborah had a laugh that was like music, and when she reached for him, she did it with the same strength she brought to every scene. The feeling went beyond just being physically attracted to something that felt almost spiritual. The second name came out easier, like a dam had broken and the words were just flowing now. Jessica Lange, he said, with a big grin that hinted at trouble and memories that still made him feel warm decades later. Now that woman was like beautiful poetry in motion, both in front of the camera and when we were alone. Jessica had a strength that could burn right through any defenses you put up. Working with her was like leading a symphony where every note had to be perfect, perfectly on time, perfectly full of passion. Langa wasn't just an actress and a performer. She was an intellectual, an artist who understood deep human feelings in ways most people only dreamed about. That mix of raw talent and deep intelligence was amazing. When Jessica looked at you, it felt like she was seeing right through to the real you, reading chapters of your story that you'd forgotten you'd written. Their love affair had been short but all-consuming, like one of the most intense scenes you could film. All passion and artistry and moments that burned themselves into his memory forever. She had this way of touching you that made normal movements feel deep and meaningful. A hand on your shoulder became a promise of something more. A kiss goodnight became a secret vow whispered in the dark. When Jessica Lange wanted you, you felt it in every part of your body, in every breath you took. The talks they had were just as close as the physical moments. She talked about what it meant to be human with such great words that listening to her was almost like being seduced itself. The third name surprised even the biggest fans of Ron's career who thought they knew everything about his work and his personal life. Glenn Close, he said, and suddenly the room felt alive with secrets and big news. She was different from anyone else I'd ever worked with. Glenn was so much more than just a brilliant actress. She was the first woman on a film set who challenged me intellectually and personally equally. Glenn was the kind of woman who saw right through all the director authority and professional distance I tried to keep. She had this way of making you feel both totally vulnerable and completely safe at the same time. Our relationship was complicated, filled with real artistic work together and personal intensity that eventually led to us not working together on some projects. But now the truth was coming out of the secret place where he'd kept it hidden. The tension hadn't just been about work and being creative. It had been sexual and passionate and all-consuming. Glenn had woken up something in him that went far beyond just making movies. Their partnership on set had been electric and full of energy, but their partnership in private was fiery and unforgettable. The woman who challenged him as a director had also taught him things about wanting and human connection that completely changed how he understood closeness. Working with Glenn Close had been like walking on a tightrope between professional greatness and personal passion. She was confident, knew more about Hollywood ways than most. A woman who knew exactly what she wanted both on set and in private. Behind closed doors, away from the cameras that captured their work performances, Glenn showed him parts of himself he never knew existed. She was demanding in the best way, passionate. A woman who took what she wanted with the same carefulness and artistry she brought to every role. The fourth name came with an even bigger smile, one that suggested memories still warm enough to make him blush even after all these years. Meryl Streep, he said, and for a moment he seemed lost in thought. Now that woman could make a scene sing like nothing else in the world. Merle had a presence that could make magic happen everywhere she went. Whether she was giving a long speech that made audiences cry or just existing in your space with quiet strength, that woman could make you forget your own name with just one look. Meryl Streep was pure artistic genius wrapped in elegance and grace. When she looked at you with those intelligent eyes, it felt like being caught in bright lights that showed every hidden part of your soul. She had this easy confidence that came from many years of giving some of the most life-changing performances in movie history. But with Ron, she wasn't just acting, she was leading, and he was more than willing to follow wherever that brilliant mind wanted to take him. Their time together had been stolen moments between movies, quick meetings in hotel rooms and private places that left him breathless and wanting more. Merle had this way of making even the most ordinary hotel room feel like heaven on earth. She'd bring her script, talk about character choices and motivations in that voice that could make you speechless. And somehow those intellectual talks would turn into something much closer and more real. The woman who'd given the world some of her greatest performances had given him nights he'd never forget. Her presence was a kind of high that he'd never quite gotten over, even after all these years. The fifth name carried a different kind of excitement altogether. Kate Winslet, he said with a laugh that was pure fun and young memories. Now that woman knew how to break all the rules, including the ones about staying professional on a film set. Kate was dangerous in the best possible way. She had this wild side that made every moment feel like you were living on borrowed time and making every second count. Kate represented everything that traditional Hollywood tried to keep quiet and control. She was rebellious and tough, a woman who'd rather fail her way than succeed by following someone else's script. That attitude went into everything she did, including the way she went after life and love and connection. With Kate, there were no games, no pretending, no careful borders. She wanted what she wanted, and she went for it with a directness that was both shocking and incredibly appealing to someone like Ron, who'd spent his career keeping a professional distance. Their meetings had been wild and surprising times that left him feeling like he'd just survived a beautiful storm. Kate didn't try to win you over with flowers and poetry and old-fashioned sweet talking. She seduced you with her intensity, with that voice that could growl promises in your ear that made your heart race. She was the kind of woman who could make you forget every professional rule your agent ever told you to keep. And with Kate, forgetting felt like the most natural thing in the world to do. She brought a young energy to everything, a refusal to accept limits that made being around her feel like being truly alive in a way most people never experienced. The sixth name brought a gentler smile, one mixed with real kindness and a true bond. Kate Blanchett, he said, and his voice sounded softer than before when talking about the others. Sweet Kate, with her grace and her wise ways, that woman could love you so completely you'd forget there was ever a time before her. Kate had a soul that was older than her years, deeper than her most serious performances. And when she shared it with you, it felt like coming home to a place you didn't even know you'd been searching for. Kate Blanchett was like poetry in movement and smarts combined. A woman who'd lived a full life and somehow managed to put all of it into her acting and her way of being. But in private, away from the sets and the productions, Kate was simply a woman who knew how to love completely and truly. She had these hands that moved with such grace and care that could touch you like you were something precious and delicate. Something to be enjoyed slowly rather than won or owned. Their relationship had been different from the others, built on a real friendship that sometimes grew into something closer and more real. Kate never asked for anything, never pushed for more than he was willing to give. She simply existed in your space with such warmth and truth that fighting it became impossible and unnecessary. When Kate Blanchett wanted to love you, it felt like the most natural and beautiful thing in the world to let her. Her intelligence was as amazing as her beauty, her humor as charming as her talent. There was a spiritual quality to their connection that went beyond the physical feelings entirely. The seventh and final name hung in the air before he spoke it. The last part of a confession that had already rewritten movie history and changed how people would see his career and personal life forever. Audrey Hepburn, he said, and the heavy feeling of that revelation settled over the room like morning fog. Now this was impossible, people might say, but Ron smiled and continued, I was younger then. She was still alive, and we found each other in ways that went against the public story of her carefully built life. Audrey was elegance mixed with deep human failing, a woman who carried grace in every move and dignity in every word. Being with Audrey was like dancing at the edge of a dream. Exciting, gentle, and absolutely unforgettable. Oh. Dre Hepburn was a force of quiet beauty dressed up as a vulnerable artist. She had this presence that filled every room she entered with something that went beyond just physical attraction, a power that drew people toward her, whether they wanted to be pulled in or not. With Audrey, there was no halfway. You either gave in completely to the experience of knowing her or you stayed away. Because going halfway with Audrey Hepburn was like trying to hold starlight in your bare hands. Their meetings had been rare but explosive and meaningful in ways that went beyond the physical. Audrey carried grace and passion equally, and both shone bright enough to light up everything in their path. When she looked at you with those legendary eyes, it felt like being seen by someone who understood every beautiful part of your soul because she'd been to those places herself. She had this voice that could make a confession sound like poetry, that could turn sadness into something beautiful and healing. In private, away from the public image and the global adoration, Audrey Hepburn was a woman struggling with the pressure of being perfect and the weight of being an icon. And sometimes that struggle looked a lot like passion and raw need. She showed him that even the most perfect-seeming people were complicated and layered and real beneath their public faces. The silence that followed was so loud. 7 names, 7 legends, 7 secrets that had just rewritten everything the world thought they knew about Ron Howard. He sat back in his chair, that smile still at the corners of his lips. The interviewer finally found his voice, stuttering slightly as he tried to take in what he just heard. Ron, he managed. These are some of the biggest names in movie history. Are you saying that all of these relationships were kept completely secret? Ron tilted his head, that thinking pose that had become as much a part of his signature as his director style. Secret isn't the right word, he said thoughtfully. Private is better. There's a real difference between keeping something hidden because you're embarrassed and keeping something sacred because it matters too much to share with the whole world. These women, these moments, they were sacred to me. His fingers drew designs on the arm of the chair as he continued. People think they know everything about celebrities these days. Every film they make, every person they're photographed with, every award they win gets written down and looked at and pulled apart forever. But back then, we had something precious that's almost gone now. We had privacy. We had the chance to be human beings first and public figures second. There was a kind of freedom in that, he thought aloud, a freedom that doesn't exist anymore in this time of always being connected and watched closely. And there you have it. 7 names that will forever change how the world sees Ron Howard. 7 legends who knew him in ways the public never imagined. At 71, he's finally told the truth that's been burning inside him for decades. The king of popular cinema has revealed his most intimate secrets. And somehow it only makes him shine brighter, because that's what real artists do. They live fully, love deeply, and when they're ready, they tell their stories without being sorry.